I set the old kitchen timer down on the courtroom table, the same one my father shoved into my 17-year-old hands. The tick-tock echoed louder than the judge's gavel. 10 minutes, he had said. 10 minutes to erase me as their daughter. 10 minutes to decide which shirts, which shoes, which pieces of a whole life I could carry before the locks clicked shut. My name is Nora Quinn. I'm 50 years old now, and for more than half my life I've been known as the girl who was cast out of her family for getting pregnant in the 10th grade. Back then, I was just a scared teenager in a small coastal town, clutching a thrift store backpack and praying the rain would hide my tears. Today, I'm a mother, a restaurant owner, and the only parent my son, Sage, has ever truly known. And yet, here I was, 20 years later, staring at those same parents across polished oak benches, watching their lawyer read from a statement they'd polished for the cameras. "We forgive our daughter." The words dripped like honey over poison. Forgive me? Forgive me. For surviving the storm they threw me into? For raising a child they swore would ruin me? For building a life without a single dollar, a single meal, a single phone call from them? I could feel every eye in the courtroom shift, waiting to see if I would break, if I would crumble under the weight of their performance. Instead, I pressed my fingertip against the timer. The red dial sat frozen at 10. That was all they ever gave me. 10 minutes. And now they were suing me for the very son they abandoned before he even had a name. Before I tell you how we got here, before the lies, the gifts, the lawyers, and the ambushes, please take a second to like this video if you've ever had to set boundaries that cost you blood. Subscribe only if you believe that family is proven by presence, not by last names. Because this is not just my story. This is what happens when the people who threw you out decide they want back in. The night it all began still smells like lemon polish and cigarette smoke. Our living room looked like a catalog spread. White leather couch, crystal chandelier, the kind of staged perfection my mother lived for. I stood in the middle of it, clutching a thin plastic stick with 2 pink lines that wouldn't stop screaming at me. My hands shook so badly I thought the test might snap in half. I was 17, a sophomore with A- grades, a part-time shift at the diner, and one secret that had just destroyed everything. My mother was the first to speak. Her manicure gleamed as she crossed her arms. "You're lying!" Her voice cut through me, sharp and cold like the winter wind off the bay. No daughter of mine would be that common. I wanted to argue, to say the 3 tests lined up on the bathroom counter didn't lie, but my father didn't even wait for the words. He moved with that calm precision he used when tallying restaurant profits. Up the stairs, down the stairs, suitcase in hand. The one they bought for college tours I was never going to take now. He set it by the front door and looked at his watch, then at me. 10 minutes. That's all he said. I thought he might yell, slam doors, curse the boy's name. But no, he gave me 10 minutes like it was a business transaction. 10 minutes to stop being their daughter. 10 minutes to erase 17 years of birthdays, piano recitals, Sunday dinners I thought meant something. "Dad, please." My voice cracked in a way I'd never heard from myself before. He didn't answer. He just flipped over the family portrait on the mantel, the one where we wore matching sweaters and forced smiles for the Christmas card. The frame hit the wood with a soft thud. My mother stood by the grandfather clock, pretending to check her nails. "We'll tell everyone you're studying abroad. Don't call us. Don't come back." Her tone was so casual, you'd think she was ordering takeout. The boy who'd promised me forever, Tyler, had already blocked my number. His Stanford-bound future mattered more than my swollen stomach, more than the life inside me. That truth hurt worse than the rejection in my parents' eyes. I remember staring at the suitcase. Inside, I shoved what I could. 3 t-shirts, a pair of jeans, my grandmother's silver locket they must have forgotten in the drawer, and the $201 I'd saved from tips. Not much of a life, but it was all I was allowed to keep. The kitchen timer on the counter ticked down, every second a hammer. My father's eyes followed it like it was a courtroom clock. I begged again. Just let me stay until I finish school. I'll figure everything else out. He adjusted his Yale class ring, not looking at me. Leave your keys. The metal clinked against the table as I set them down. That sound still rings in my memory louder than any slammed door. When the timer buzzed, it was final. Not a pause, not a maybe. Final. My father opened the door without a word. My mother refused to meet my eyes, and I walked out into the cold with a suitcase heavier than my whole world. The rain was waiting. Of course it was. The kind of rain that soaks you through in seconds, makes your teeth chatter before you even find your breath. I dragged that suitcase down the slick sidewalk, watching the house lights fade behind me. No car followed. No one called my name. I ended up at the bus stop near Riverside Park, sitting on the bench with my wet hair plastered to my face. A girl with a baby growing inside her, disowned before she could even understand what family really meant. That was my inheritance. 10 minutes, one suitcase, and a story I never wanted to tell. Until now. The rain didn't let up that night. It drummed against the bus stop roof until I couldn't tell which drops were on the glass and which ones were running down my cheeks. My suitcase sat between my sneakers like a sad pet, fabric already soaking through. That's when I heard the squeak of old leather boots and saw a woman stop in front of me. She looked to be in her 60s, hair streaked silver, wrapped in a wool coat that smelled faintly of cedar. In one hand, she held a paper bag, steam curling from the top. "You're going to freeze out here," she said gently, like she'd been speaking to me for years. I didn't answer, too tired, too suspicious. But then she lowered herself onto the wet bench beside me, ignoring the rain, and placed the bag in my lap. Chicken soup. Hot, fragrant, real. "My name's Lorraine Park. I live around the corner. You don't have to explain a thing. Just come warm up." I don't know why I stood up. Maybe it was the way she didn't pry. Maybe it was the smell of that soup. Her shop was a glowing rectangle at the end of the block, half cafe, half woodworking studio. When she pushed the door open, heat wrapped around me and the air carried that odd but comforting mix of espresso, sawdust, and lemon oil. A black and white photo of a younger woman hung by the register. I noticed how Lorraine's eyes softened when she caught me looking. "My daughter," she said simply. "She's gone now. The house is too quiet without someone to care for." She gave me a quilted room above the cafe, slanted ceiling, a secondhand crib pushed against the wall, a nightstand with a lamp shaped like a lighthouse. The quilt smelled of lavender, and the sheets were already warm from the dryer. For the first time in 3 nights, I didn't shiver myself awake. Morning came with oatmeal and a spiral notebook. Lorraine tapped it with a wooden pencil. "Write 2 things you know are true today, then breathe. That's it. That's the rule." It sounded silly, but it gave my spinning mind a hook to cling to. On the fridge, she had pinned a post-it, presence over pedigree. She didn't treat me like a burden. She gave me shifts behind the cafe counter, later showed me her ledgers, how to track receipts, balance payroll, plan for tax season. In the evenings, she'd pull out pieces of walnut and sand them smooth, teaching me to listen to the grain before cutting. "Every strong thing starts as pieces," she told me. We built a crib together right there on the cafe floor, glue and dowels and laughter, mixing with the hiss of the espresso machine. That crib wasn't just furniture. It was proof I had a future, even if I couldn't see it yet. Lorraine had a battered camcorder she sometimes set on the counter after closing. "Little messages for later," she shrugged, red light blinking. She offered it to me once. I shook my head then, but she didn't push. She just smiled, the kind of smile that steadied me more than any sermon or lecture ever had. I didn't know it at the time, but she was planting anchors everywhere. The notebook, the crib, the camcorder, the motto on the fridge. Each one was a promise that the world didn't end just because your parents said you were done. Each one was a reminder that a stranger could choose you when blood did not. And slowly I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't lost forever. Sage was born on a stormy April morning, the kind where the power flickered and the rain rattled against the cafe windows like an impatient guest. Lorraine boiled water on the gas stove just in case the lights went out. She held my hand through 18 hours and whispered, "Every storm passes, child." When Sage finally wailed his way into the world, she was the first to smile through her tears. That cry? That's not just survival, that's strength. From the beginning, he was different. At 9 months, he was pulling himself up on cafe chairs, balancing like he owned the floor. At 3, he toddled into the workshop, grabbed one of Lorraine's wood scraps, and tried to listen to the grain the way she did, pressing it against his tiny ear. By 5, he had a habit of lining up sugar packets and coffee stirrers like surgical tools, whispering, "Patient is ready." Customers laughed. Lorraine just winked at me, the way she always did when she recognized something rare. School never quite contained him. While other kids doodled dragons, Sage drew hearts, literal hearts, with valves and chambers he'd copied from the old anatomy book Lorraine gave me to study for my GED. By the time he was 8, he could explain why his teacher's hands turned blue in the winter. "Circulation, Mom," he said casually, like he'd read it off a cereal box. There was a summer when he spent weeks in the cafe corner dissecting thrift store toys, pulling apart wires and reassembling them into little Frankenstein radios. When one actually worked, static bursting through the speakers, Lorraine nearly dropped her coffee mug. "You're supposed to be a kid," I scolded, but secretly I was terrified and proud in equal measure. Terrified because brilliance attracts attention. Proud because it meant the bloodline didn't define him. His choices, his mind, his fire did. At 10, Sage asked if he could shadow the paramedics who came for coffee on late shifts. They laughed, but one let him sit in the ambulance, showing him the monitor leads. He soaked it up like language he already knew. By 12, he was volunteering at the local clinic after school, fetching supplies, watching every procedure with the focus of someone twice his age. "He doesn't just watch," the nurse whispered to me. "He absorbs." Lorraine made sure his genius didn't grow without roots. She gave him chores, shifts at the counter, Saturday mornings, sweeping sawdust. "Head in the sky, feet on the floor," she said, handing him the broom. He never argued, maybe because he knew she meant it as love, not control. By 16, Sage had published a paper with a local university mentor on oxygen saturation levels in newborns. At 17, he graduated high school early and stepped straight into an accelerated pre-med program. At 22, he was the youngest in his med school class to perform a solo procedure under supervision. I would watch him walk into the hospital in his scrubs, tall and calm, and still see that boy with sugar packets lined up on the cafe table. Lorraine saw it too. "Every sturdy thing starts as pieces," she'd told us once, and somehow Sage had gathered all the broken pieces of my past, the suitcase, the 10 minutes, the rain, and built something unshakable out of them. He was no longer just my son. He was a storm turned into light. And though I didn't know it then, that light was about to shine too brightly for my parents to ignore. It happened on a Thursday morning, the kind where I was too busy refilling sugar jars at the cafe to notice the whispers. Lorraine had passed away 2 years earlier, but her cafe, Second Harbor, was still the heartbeat of our lives. The regulars came in with their folded newspapers under their arms, but that day, one of them froze in the doorway. He held the paper up like it was holy scripture. "Prodigy doctor saves 2 lives in 1 night." The headline stretched across the front page of the Everford Gazette, and right below a full-color photo of Sage in scrubs, mask hanging loose around his neck, exhaustion written on his face but pride glowing in his eyes. The article described how he'd led an emergency ECMO procedure after a power failure in the ICU, stabilizing not one but two patients in the chaos. His name was in bold, Dr. Sage Quinn, Chief of Cardiothoracic Innovation, St. Helena Medical Center. I should have felt nothing but pride, and I did. My chest swelled, my hands shook, tears blurred the print. But under it all, dread laced through me like a thin crack in glass. Because that name, Quinn, wasn't just a name. It was a flare shot into the night sky, impossible for the people who once erased me to ignore. By evening, the article was everywhere. Local news replayed Sage's photo on the 6 o'clock broadcast. A medical blog picked it up. The youngest department head in the state. By midnight, a national outlet ran the story under the headline, Doogie Howser for Gen Z. My phone buzzed nonstop. Texts from cafe regulars, former classmates, even strangers. Is that your boy? You must be so proud. And then, buried between the congratulations, came a voicemail from an unknown number. My mother's voice, brittle and careful, the same tone she used when talking to investors. Nora, we need to discuss our grandson. Not my son. Our grandson. The words hollowed me out. 20 years of silence, and now they spoke like he was property misplaced, ready to be reclaimed. I played the message 3 times, each syllable scraping deeper, until finally I set the phone down on the counter. Lorraine's post-it still clung to the fridge in her tidy script. Presence over pedigree. I whispered it out loud, steadying myself. But inside, I already knew. The storm I thought I'd outrun was circling back. And this time, it had my son's name written on its thunderclouds. The first package showed up at the hospital front desk wrapped in silver paper with a bow, too perfect to be coincidence. Inside, a Rolex Submariner, gleaming like it had been waiting in a vault for this exact performance. Sage brought it home in a paper bag, his brow furrowed. Mom, someone's sending me things, expensive things, no note except... He handed me the card. Gold letters. Your loving grandparents. I told him to return it. He did. But the gifts didn't stop. A Mont Blanc pen set. A leather-bound first edition of Gray's Anatomy. Each one heavier than the last. Each one meant to whisper, "We are family. You belong to us." Then came the stranger. A man in a windbreaker pretending to browse pastries at the cafe, camera lens poking through his bag. Lorraine used to warn me about men like that. Eyes that scan, not see. A week later, Sage told me he'd noticed the same man in the hospital parking lot scribbling in a notepad. A private investigator. Paid to turn my son into an inventory list. It wasn't just gifts and shadows. My parents knew how to weaponize image. They booked a reservation at Second Harbor under a false name. When I came to their table with a menu, my mother slid off her gloves with the drama of a stage actress. "Hello, Nora." My father's voice followed, smooth as courtroom marble. "We need to talk about Sage." I stood straighter, tray pressed to my chest. "You need to leave." They didn't. They smiled like they'd already won. Within days, a local news segment aired. My parents standing on the courthouse steps in tailored coats. My mother's voice trembled for the cameras. "We were young parents once, too. We made mistakes. But we forgive our daughter. We only want to meet our grandson. Forgive me." Again that word, sharp as a blade dipped in sugar. The clip spread fast, reshared by people who never knew the truth. Strangers commented under the cafe's page, "Family is everything." Why so cruel, Nora? Even some regulars whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. 20 years is a long time to hold a grudge. That was the cruelest part of gaslighting, how it made you doubt yourself. Had I been too rigid? Had I let my wounds calcify into walls too high for anyone to scale? But then I'd remember the rain, the suitcase, the keys clinking on the counter. I'd remember Lorraine's voice. presence over pedigree. And I knew. They weren't reaching for Sage out of love. They were circling him like investors around an IPO, packaging forgiveness as strategy, testing my boundaries for weak spots. The storm wasn't just here. It was gathering cameras, allies, and scripts, and every move they made was designed to make me the villain of my own story. Daniel was the one who suggested we go through Lorraine's old office. "If they're moving this fast, we need more than feelings," he said, setting his briefcase on the cafe counter. His tone wasn't sharp, but it carried the weight of courtrooms where evidence outweighed tears. That night, we climbed the narrow stairs above the cafe into Lorraine's office. The room smelled of cedar and dust, as if the wood itself had been waiting for us. Against the far wall stood the green steel safe no one had touched since her funeral. The key still hung from a string tacked inside her bulletin board, marked with a faded post-it, "For Nora, when the time comes." My hands trembled as I turned the lock. The heavy door swung open with a groan, and inside, stacked between folders and fabric-bound ledgers, lay two things that changed everything. First, a slim camcorder, battery pack still taped to its side. Daniel slid in the tape, and the tiny screen flickered alive. Lorraine's face appeared, older than I remembered, but her eyes still lit with the same warmth. "If you're watching this, Nora, it means the past has found you again. Listen carefully. I left a clause in the Second Harbor Trust. Any heir who abandons their child forfeits claim in perpetuity. I saw what your parents did to you. I wasn't going to let them rewrite that story 20 years later. This cafe, this fund, belongs to you and Sage, and no one else." The second item was a sealed envelope, its edges yellowed. Inside, the original document my parents forced across the counter that night long ago. Their signatures sprawled in ink beside the clause I had almost forgotten. Any claim of guardianship or kinship, including future offspring, is here relinquished without right of contest. I pressed the paper flat on the desk, tracing the ink with my finger. 20 years of silence and shame suddenly transformed into proof, not just of what they did, but of what they had no right to undo. Daniel leaned closer, reading the lines with a lawyer's eye. His smile was small but certain. "This is it, the receipts. They can gaslight the town, but they can't gaslight a judge." I looked again at Lorraine's frozen smile on the camcorder screen. It felt like she was still here, steadying me the way she did on that rainy night so long ago. For the first time in weeks, my chest loosened. The storm outside hadn't passed, but at least now, I wasn't empty-handed. I had armor. It was barely past dawn when the knock rattled my front door. Not a polite tap. 3 hard, practiced thuds that made Sage look up from his coffee mug. I opened it, heart hammering, and there stood a man in a navy windbreaker, clipboard tucked under his arm. His tone was flat, rehearsed. "Ms. Nora Quinn, you've been served." He slid a thick envelope into my hand, nodded once, and walked back to his idling sedan. No small talk, no hesitation, just duty done. Inside, the papers reeked of fresh toner and arrogance. Charles and Eileen Quinn D. Nora Quinn, typed in bold across the top. Their demands spilled out like a grocery list. Petition for grandparent visitation, defamation damages, trust contest. They hadn't just come knocking on Sage's life. They had thrown open the courthouse doors, dragging us in before we could even prepare our counterpunch. I sat at the table, reading line after line, words like unfit, estranged, forgiveness extended, their script dressed up in legalese. They claimed I had poisoned Sage against them, that I'd slandered their names to the community, that the Second Harbor Trust was unfairly withheld from its rightful heirs. Sage's jaw tightened as he skimmed the complaint. "They're rewriting history on paper," he muttered, like it never happened. Daniel arrived minutes later, still buttoning his jacket. He flipped through the pages, his brow tightening but his voice calm. "This is strategic. They filed first to control the narrative. Judges see the petitioner as the one seeking resolution. They're hoping you'll look defensive. On the last page, a red-stamped date glared back at me. Temporary hearing scheduled in 14 days. 2 weeks. That's all I had before standing in front of a judge with the people who had thrown me out in 10 minutes, now painting themselves as victims. I pressed Lorraine's camcorder tape against my chest, remembering her words. I saw what your parents did to you. I wasn't going to let them rewrite that story, but staring at the calendar, the weight of time pressed down harder than ever. 14 days to prove that the life we built wasn't theirs to reclaim. 14 days before the storm officially moved from whispers to the record of the state. I whispered it to myself, steadying. They drew first blood, but they're not going to win this war. Daniel spread the complaint across my cafe's back office desk, his pen tapping in short bursts like a metronome of urgency. They want to control the story, he said, so we flip it. We don't fight in the daylight yet. We collect receipts in the dark. That became our mantra. Collect receipts. Over the next week, our lives turned into a quiet investigation. Sage handled 12-hour shifts at the hospital, but every night he dropped into the office to check updates. I brewed endless coffee while Daniel mapped threads of evidence across sticky notes and folders. The first break came from a forgotten Gmail account Tyler had once used for his woodworking business. A subpoena Daniel drafted and a sympathetic judge later, we had access. The inbox was a minefield of arrogance. An email from Charles. If Sage signs over a portion of the trust, you'll get your 10% advisory fee. A reply from Tyler. Happy to play the prodigal dad if it helps. Just make sure my cut clears. Proof of collusion. Greed dressed up as reconciliation. Next came the money trail. Daniel's paralegal traced wire transfers, small but regular payments from a Quinn Family LLC to Tyler's personal account. The memos read like whispers. Consulting, outreach, family liaison, in reality, hush money for betrayal. Then there were the LinkedIn messages, screenshots Sage reluctantly shared, his inbox littered with polite but predatory notes from strangers linked to Quinn Holdings. So proud of your heritage. Dinner to discuss your future? Subtext hidden beneath corporate polish. Step into the fold. We stacked it all, piece by piece, until Daniel's office wall looked like a crime drama board. Red yarn replaced by yellow highlighter. Each document pinned with dates circled in thick ink. But the most important artifact wasn't digital. It was a voice recording Sage caught by accident. His phone left on in his locker at the hospital. The audio was muffled, but the words were clear. My father's voice, clipped and disdainful. She was never fit to raise him. This time, the court will see reason. When Daniel heard it, he didn't smile. He just pressed stop and said, "We serve them back. Not in anger, in timing, at the gala, in front of their peers. That's when this will sting the most." I felt the weight shift inside me. For weeks, I'd been the defendant in my own story. Now, for the first time, we were building offense, quietly, methodically, like carpenters laying out tools before the strike of a hammer. The storm hadn't broken yet, but for the first time, I wasn't bracing. I was aiming. The confrontation didn't come in a courtroom. It came in the polished marble lobby of St. Helena Medical Center. I was dropping off a care package for Sage. Soup, clean scrubs, a stack of energy bars. The lobby smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. Then I heard it. My father's voice, loud and commanding, slicing through the quiet hum of wheelchairs and ringing phones. "We are here to see our grandson, Dr. Sage Quinn. Call him down immediately." Heads turned. A cluster of visitors shifted uncomfortably. And there they were, Charles and Eileen, dressed like royalty on parade, with a cameraman hovering behind them. It wasn't a visit, it was theater. The receptionist stammered, I can't. Patients only." My mother slammed her palm on the counter. "We are his blood. Do you understand? His blood." That word rang in my ears like a curse. Before I could step forward, the elevator doors slid open. Sage walked out, still in scrubs, hair damp from scrubbing out of surgery. His eyes landed on them first, then on me. For a moment, silence stretched. Then my father beamed like a man at a press conference. "Sage! Grandson! We've come to claim our rightful place in your life." Cameras clicked. Nurses froze mid-step. The air thickened. Sage didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words were short, sharp, surgical. "Escort them out." 2 security guards moved in, gently but firmly steering Charles and Eileen back toward the glass doors. My father barked, "You're making a mistake, boy. The world will know what she did to you." My mother sobbed theatrically, clutching her pearls. The cameraman caught every frame until Sage lifted a hand, calm but absolute. "Turn that off. Now." And somehow, even through the chaos, the man obeyed. The clip still found its way online within the hour. 10 seconds long, shaky phone footage from a visitor. Sage in green scrubs, his voice clear over the murmur, "Escort them out." It spread like wildfire. Some praised his boundaries. Others accused me of poisoning him. But I didn't care about the comments. What mattered was the shift I saw in Sage's eyes. No hesitation, no tug-of-war between duty and guilt, just clarity. For the first time, he had said it out loud, not just for me, but for the world. They don't belong here. And as I watched the doors swing shut behind them, I felt it deep in my chest. We weren't hiding anymore. The fight had stepped into the open. The video from the hospital lobby hadn't cooled for 24 hours before it was everywhere. Morning shows ran the 10-second clip on loop, anchors dissecting Sage's tone like it was a political speech. "They look like loving grandparents," one host sighed, pausing on the frame of my mother's trembling hands. "And he seems cold." The narrative shifted fast. Instead of 20 years of silence, the story became one of forgiveness rejected. Headlines screamed, "Estranged daughter poisons son against wealthy family." Online forums flooded with comments, "Blood is blood. She should be grateful. Why deny an old couple their grandson?" I stayed off the internet that week, but even in the cafe I felt eyes following me, whispers curling like smoke. A customer left a folded newspaper on a table, the headline circled in red, "Quinn heirs shut out at hospital." A message, not an accident. Daniel reminded me, this is their gaslighting, scaled up. Court isn't the only battleground. They're trying to paint you as the villain in the public square. So we built our own stage. 2 nights later, under the warm lights of the Second Harbor Community Hall, I stood before a crowd of neighbors, donors, and reporters. The walls smelled of cedar and coffee, Lorraine's legacy alive in every beam. Sage spoke first, voice steady. "When I was a child, my mom never had wealth to give me. What she had was presence, and presence builds a life stronger than pedigree ever could." Then it was my turn. I set down a box on the podium. Inside, diapers and formula receipts Lorraine had helped me pay for 20 years ago. I pulled out the crumpled ledger, numbers scratched in her handwriting. "This," I said, lifting the paper so the crowd could see, "is what family looks like. Not gifts with strings, not headlines, not cameras in hospital lobbies. Family is sacrifice that no one sees until years later." The hall was quiet, cameras rolling, but this time, the frame was ours. Not staged tears and pearls, but a ledger full of grocery bills and the story of how one woman showed up when others slammed the door. When we finished, there wasn't applause so much as a murmur that grew into something heavier, agreement, people nodding, some even wiping their eyes. The next morning, a smaller headline appeared online, "Quinn Mother Speaks Presence Over Pedigree." It didn't erase the smear campaign, but it planted a counter-narrative, truth, steady and stubborn. And as I watched Sage pack up the receipts back into the box, I knew we had tilted the scale, just a little. But in the war of stories, a little was everything. The night of the gala shimmered with champagne and chandelier light. The Quinn family had chosen their battlefield well, the annual hospital fundraising banquet, filled with donors, board members, and cameras. I stood near the back of the hall, my palms damp, the faint tick of Lorraine's kitchen timer hidden in my purse like a secret heartbeat. Daniel leaned close, whispering, "We have 10 minutes once Sage gets the mic. Then we move." The stage glowed as Sage stepped up, still in scrubs, his badge clipped to his chest. Against tuxedos and sequins, he looked out of place. But that was the point. He began softly, "I just came from the operating room. Tonight, a man breathes because a team stood by his side for 8 hours straight. Family," he paused, letting the word hang, "isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up when you're gasping for air." A hush rippled across the room. Then came the twist. Behind him, the screen flickered alive. Lorraine's recorded message. Her voice filled the hall, steady and clear. "I saw what Charles and Eileen did to their daughter. I chose to be the family they refused to be. That's why I built Second Harbor, not for heirs, but for those abandoned." Gasps, murmurs. The Quinns shifted in their seats, their smiles cracking. Daniel clicked to the next slide, screenshots of emails, Tyler haggling over a 10% advisory fee, wire transfers labeled consulting, a private agreement signed and dated, projected 10 feet tall for every donor to see, and then the finale. He lifted the original relinquishment document, enlarged on the screen, my parents' signatures under the clause, "Rights to offspring relinquished in perpetuity." The hall fell silent. Even the clink of silverware stopped. That's when Daniel nodded to the back. Right on cue, 2 uniformed officers stepped in. One carried a stack of restraining orders. The process server checked his watch, pressed the kitchen timer in my hand, and as the bell chimed 10 minutes, he strode forward. "Charles and Eileen Quinn, you've been served." The sound echoed louder than any gavel. My father's face flushed crimson. My mother's pearls rattled as her hands shook. Cameras clicked, catching every frame, the mighty Quinns reduced to defendants under fluorescent light. I exhaled, the knot in my chest finally loosening. For years, I had been the one shoved into silence, the girl with a torn suitcase on a rainy street. Tonight, the power shifted. This wasn't just defense anymore. It was reclamation. And as the officers escorted them out, the applause began, not thunderous, but steady, rising from the back and rolling forward. Applause not for wealth, but for truth laid bare. The gala had been spectacle. The courtroom was sterility. Fluorescent lights, oak benches polished too often, the faint smell of paper and disinfectant. This was where noise had to turn into fact. We sat at the petitioner's table, Daniel calm as ever, his notes stacked with surgical precision. Across from us, my parents, Charles in a stiff navy suit, Eileen with pearls strung tight against her throat, looked smaller than they had on television, but meaner too. Tyler slouched behind them, avoiding Sage's eyes. The judge, a woman with sharp glasses and a sharper tone, adjusted her papers. "We are here to consider the petition for grandparent visitation, the allegations of defamation, and the contest over the Second Harbor Trust." Her gavel tapped once. "Proceed." Their lawyer went first, voice syrupy. These grandparents were cruelly shut out. All they ask for is time with their grandson, to heal old wounds. Blood should matter, Your Honor. That word again. Blood. Daniel rose slowly, clicked a button, and the courtroom monitor lit up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Exhibit A. The relinquishment document, signatures fresh even 20 years later. Exhibit B. Wire transfers from Quinn Holdings to Tyler. Memo lines labeled consulting. Exhibit C. The hospital lobby video played frame by frame. Charles pounding the counter. Eileen shrieking, "We are his blood!" "Your Honor," Daniel said evenly, "my clients are not denying biology. They are denying entitlement. There was no existing bond between Sage and the petitioners. In fact, the record shows deliberate abandonment, documented relinquishment, and recent harassment campaigns. This is not love. This is leverage. The judge's eyes flicked toward Sage, who sat upright in his scrubs. Dr. Quinn, do you wish to add anything? Sage didn't hesitate. I've been a son all my life, but not theirs. I don't need visits arranged by the court. My family is the one that showed up when they didn't. Silence swallowed the room. Even the bailiff stilled. The ruling came crisp and final. Petition for visitation. Denied, citing no prior relationship and best interest statutes. Defamation claim dismissed with prejudice. Trust contest barred by the original relinquishment clause. Harassment, a restraining order entered against Charles, Eileen, and Tyler, enforceable immediately. The gavel struck. Court adjourned. The Quinns erupted, my father's voice rising, my mother sobbing theatrically. But it didn't matter. Deputies stepped forward, holding them back as the judge swept out. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Justice wasn't loud. It was measured, stamped, recorded in ink and statute. As we walked out into the bright courthouse corridor, the cameras flashed again. This time, though, they weren't for the Quinns. They were for Sage, the doctor who had spoken plainly, and for the story that finally had its judgment. For me, the victory wasn't just legal. It was the moment I realized I no longer carried that torn suitcase alone. The weight was lifted, set down in the record books where it belonged. The courtroom verdict didn't just free us from my parents' grip, it sparked something larger. Within days, the footage of the judge's ruling, Sage's quiet testimony, and the Quinns' public collapse ricocheted across local news and social media. But what stuck wasn't the drama. It was the phrase Sage had spoken. My family is the one that showed up when they didn't. People repeated it. On talk shows, in comment threads, on posters taped to cafe bulletin boards. Second Harbor, Lorraine's dream, suddenly had attention it had never known. Donations poured in, not from the Quinn fortune, but from teachers, nurses, grocery clerks, women who whispered, "That was me at 17. The ledger I'd held up at the town hall became a symbol. Screenshots of it circulated online. The messy handwriting, the tiny sums that had once kept me alive. At the next board meeting, the hospital matched a grant. Then the city council pledged to partner. Within months, Second Harbor expanded. Housing units, converted lofts where young mothers could stay safely for a year. Childcare cooperative, staffed by volunteers and retired teachers, giving moms space to finish school or work shifts. Legal aid clinic, a direct response to our battle. Law students and attorneys helping girls stand firm when families tried to erase them. I walked through the renovated space one evening, past fresh-painted walls that still smelled of plaster and cedar. In one room, a group of girls laughed around a crib, trading bottles and lullabies. In another, a tutor guided a young mom through algebra homework, her baby asleep on her chest. I pressed my hand to the wood of Lorraine's old workbench, now the reception desk. For the first time, I felt the past bending into something gentler. Sage joined me, dropping his bag of hospital charts onto the counter. "You know," he said, glancing at the mural of the harbor painted on the wall, "this place is saving more lives than I ever could with a scalpel." And I believed him. Second Harbor was no longer just a refuge born of one woman's kindness. It was an institution, louder than my parents' lies, sturdier than their wealth, proof that chosen family could ripple outward into policy, bricks, and mortar. Justice hadn't ended in the courtroom. It was living, breathing, building. And as I watched the lights flick on in each new apartment window, I knew the story was no longer just mine. It belonged to every girl who had once been told she had 10 minutes to disappear, and instead found a harbor to begin again. The first dinner in the new Second Harbor kitchen wasn't glamorous. No chandeliers, no white linen, just a long pine table, polished smooth, mismatched chairs dragged from thrift stores, and the smell of roasted chicken mixing with cedar beams. I set out plates while laughter echoed from the hall, young mothers swapping stories, babies babbling, volunteers clattering pans. It felt less like an institution and more like a home finally breathing again. At the center of the table sat Sage, hair mussed from a long shift, sleeves rolled up. He leaned toward one of the girls, showing her how to soothe her infant with the steady hands that had once held scalpels. She smiled at him the way I once had at Lorraine, like someone had finally stayed. When everyone settled, Daniel raised his glass of iced tea. "To chosen family," he said simply. The words carried heavier than any toast of champagne. After the plates emptied and the noise softened, Daniel nudged me toward the old workbench Lorraine had once used. He reached into his pocket and placed a small box in my hand. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a ring carved from walnut wood, polished dark, its grain catching the light. Not gold, not diamonds, just wood, warm and honest. "I thought," he said, voice steady, "that maybe we could keep building this family together." The room blurred as tears welled. Around us, girls rocked babies, dishes clinked, the hum of community never stopping. It felt right that his question wasn't asked in silence, but in the middle of all this life. I slid the ring onto my finger. It fit as if it had always belonged there. The old suitcase from that night so many years ago now sat on a shelf in the lobby, its fabric torn, a relic of exile turned into a reminder of endurance. And here, at a new table carved from Lorraine's wood, we weren't just surviving, we were feasting. I looked around, letting the scene burn into memory, candles flickering, hands reaching across bowls, children giggling. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider at a family dinner. I was home. The camera doesn't fade on the ring or the laughter. It lingers on the old suitcase tucked on the shelf in the lobby, spotlight catching the frayed handle. A reminder. Some families give you 10 minutes to leave. Others give you a lifetime to belong. And that's where I turn to you. What would you choose? Blood that abandons you, or the people who show up and stay? If this story stirred something in you, type boundary in the comments. Let's see how many of us believe that family is presence, not pedigree. And if you've ever had to draw a line with people who claimed love but brought only control, tell your story below. You might be the voice another person needs to hear tonight. Hit the like button if you felt the justice in that gavel strike. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story where we'll talk about how to protect yourself legally when family becomes a weapon. Because sometimes survival isn't just about leaving, it's about knowing how to stand your ground when the past comes knocking again.